Hello and welcome to Legally Consumed, a consumer products podcast by a consumer products law firm in Australia. I'm Raf Goldenberg and I'm joined by co-hosts Kay Ho and Will McMinn, who are members of the team at CIE Legal.
We chat with executives of consumer products companies, their legal teams and industry experts who give us a peek into their journeys as people. We explore industry-changing ideas and even share tips and tricks on how to navigate the consumer products space.
This season, we will feature guests from the automotive, retail, advertising and insights, food, beverage, and primary production and franchising sectors.
Today we've got two guests on the Legally Consumed podcast. We're very lucky to be joined by Anthony Donato and Travis Knott, co-founders of Bonehead Brewing. We're even more lucky to be recording this podcast at the brewery and drinking some of the product as we do. So my co-host today is Will McMinn. Welcome Anthony and welcome Travis and welcome Will.
Thank you for having us.
Yeah, thanks for having us on.
It's a pleasure. This is very exciting. Thank you for joining us. We always like to start the podcast by just hearing about your journeys, where how you started off. And Anthony, we might start with you. Can you just introduce yourself? Tell us about your first job and kind of how you got to where you are today.
Well, firstly, I'd like to say thank you for pronouncing my surname correctly. There's points for that.
I've been saying Donato our entire life.
Yeah, we've only known each other for 30 years or so.
My surname's not, so I just rolled.
It was a lucky. Makes me feel.
Well done. Bonus points for that. So, a little bit about myself. I'm a middle-aged father of two children who happen to have a bit of a career change approaching 40 years old. Some would call that a midlife crisis, I suppose. I wouldn't. So my first job, I ironically work with the bloke next to me now, stocking shelves at Big W, doing night fill back in the mid-90s. So Travis and I went to high school for 1 year anyway, together. We did year 12 together. And Travis pretty much got me my first job, I would say.
I did.
Because you were already working there, weren't you?
I did. I was, yeah.
Yeah. So and what did you do? How did you end up from Big W to Bonehead Brewing? I must have done something.
A little bit of a journey. So at the end of year 12, I didn't go to university myself. At the end of year 12, my parents were like, okay, you've had a week to sit on the couch. Now you can come and work at the family business for a little bit until you find your feet and what you want to do. But you're not sitting on the couch for the rest of your life. And that's a great, valuable lesson, by the way. So I really do appreciate that. It's long term, I did anyway. 20 years later, I was still working in the family business, running it. My parents had long retired. And so Travis and I, as I said, we went to school together. We started home brewing pretty much about the same time.
Same weekend, I think.
I think you got a kit for your 30th birthday.
Yeah. It's Mum's built up.
Yes. So we started home brewing coincidentally about the same time. And over the years, we enjoyed it enough that I, best man speech at your wedding, kind of announced it to the world that we're going to do this as a profession.
I hadn't had that conversation with my fiance, their wife at that time. Ant's fantastic. I love Anthony there. Ant will put his foot in his mouth.
There's a butt.
Why not? Yeah. So Jay, to her credit, was great. She's been extremely supportive. And
I must say that we couldn't have done what we've done today without our wives' support.
Absolutely.
So Travis, tell us a little bit about you and obviously you're mates with Anthony, but I'm sure you had a slightly different journey to get to where you are.
Absolutely. We went to high school together. My first job was pre that actually selling pies at the football. I was a snacks vendor.
Hilarious that you hate the sport.
Yeah, which was actually to my benefit because I was the only one that wouldn't stop selling and I've made my money. I'll just sit down and watch the game. Now I would just keep hustling. So you'd always get bestseller and then a bonus and it worked well. And then on to, a few other, I suppose, other hairnet and name tag jobs working at Big W and all that type of stuff. And then I found myself, I couldn't stand retail. I don't like the idea of working when everybody else is playing. And a lot of retail happens on the weekend. In one of our first conversations, we should open a bar together. This is Anthony and mine. And I'm like, yeah, that's great, but I want to be at the bar drinking the beer, not selling and serving the beer, you know. So just it wasn't going to work out. So sort of had another couple of gigs. Worked on the cusp of the automotive and finance and insurance industry as a research analyst for a publication. And then my girlfriend at the time, who Anthony actually introduced me to, was a neighbour, took off with her family to Brazil. So I didn't go to uni. Rather than go to uni, I spent 3 years in Brazil starting and running my own English school. And sort of always had a little bit of an entrepreneurial flair idea, I guess. Always wanted to work for myself, but had no idea how to do that or what to do that in. So Brazil, that ended after 3 years, came back to Australia, got into sales and marketing and kind of never looked back. And I worked for all manner of kind of FMCG, always kind of nicely, I suppose, looking at the resume, always pretty much the leaders in what they did, which was good.
Can you name a couple of them? Because we are a consumer products podcast, so we're keen to hear about it.
No problem. So I started, I suppose, in that world for Foster's Brewing International. So it was in a duty-free sort of role. So I managed those accounts just as a key account manager. And that was brilliant. Sort of got me an exposure to beer. Was back when they were sponsoring the Association of Surfing Professionals and the Formula One. So it sort of was at a time that they were the two things that I was really passionate about. And then beer, which I was passionate about as well. So
Definitely passionate about drinking.
oh yeah. And I suppose back then there was no real craft beer in the country. So the craft beer for us was the Belgian Beer Cafe on at the Bluestone building.
And trying to offload cases of pure blonde off to your mates. And he wasn't buying it.
Yeah, Anth was a Stella drinker in those days. And there was Stella Artois, not Estrella. And we would have basically working at Foster's, she'd given 2 cases of beer a month. So you'd always get the beer you wanted to drink. And then I think at the time they were trying to get rid of pure blonde when it first came out. So you can have 2 cases of whatever you want, or you can have 4 cases of pure blonde. And I would always have people say, oh, have you got beer? Have you got beer? So I would always take 1 case for me and 2 cases of whatever I had to get rid of for family and friends. And yeah, he wasn't. Tastes like soap. Still, I don't know. You can edit that out if you like. I don't mind. I'm sure.
It's like clicking at battery. I think that's why
Low-cal beer.
Yeah.
low taste beer too.
So I worked for those guys for a little bit and then jumped out, worked for 20th Century Fox Home Entertainment, doing DVDs for a long time.
You also palmed off the M&Ds to me that I wanted to watch.
And then what else? So then from there, worked for the guys that started bringing in recorded cider in the country. So Red Island Imports that went on to become Quiet Deeds and now Deeds Brewing. So worked for those guys back when it was literally just Pat, Dave and myself sitting around the table like this. And then jumped out and worked at Pacific Brands. And I was a national sales manager at Tontine for about 8 years before we started this. So yeah. So very different paths, really different paths.
You've done a lot, haven't you?
I have. It's very hard to hold down a job when you're a drunk. No, that's for anyone listening. Didn't do that. Excellent. Yeah. So it's kind of a crash course in sales and marketing.
Great. Thanks, guys. Can you tell us a bit about the history of Bonehead Brewing as an organisation?
Yeah. So I mean, as Ed touched on, we started brewing pretty much on the exact same weekend, and we saw this. I always had a desire, I always had a want to do something like this. And I knew that if I was going to do it, it's more likely to be with Anthony. And well, I mean, we were in competition more so than collaboration with each other for a lot of that 10-year period, fair to say. 2 mates always trying to out-brew each other and make a better beer than one another.
I started very slowly and improved.
Yeah.
It went past it.
I wouldn't say that, but others may.
No, so we took very different paths, right? So to be fair, I came out and at some point I wanted to have a brewery. So I literally developed 5 or 6 beers that were the types of beers that I wanted to make. And I spent a long period of time trying to perfect those beers. And some of those beers are still on today. So Mum's Pilsner we sell, which was the first beer I ever made. Mum gave me the barrels, the homebrew kit for my birthday. So Mum's Pilsner was the first beer I ever penned, and to this date, it's still pretty similar.
How long ago was that?
Oh, that was 15 years ago. Yeah, 45, that was a 30. So, whereas Anth took to it as he just wanted to try his hand at anything and everything that he could possibly make. And I think you found
business models today.
Yeah. And it is, and you kind of found IPAs and then really started focusing on those. I, to this date, had never made an IPA. That just wasn't what I wanted to focus on. So we took to it in a very different light. And then circa, we were at it for, as I said, maybe 8, 9 years before we decided, okay, we're either going to die wondering, or we're going to do it.
Yeah.
And it was early 2016 we started really seriously considering it.
Yeah. We called ourselves Scoundrel Brewing because, and this is, I'm sure, for the little bit of money that we made, a little bit of beer that we made and sold. No one's really going to, dig too deep into it. But so we called ourselves Scoundrel Brewing because it was just all brewed in the backyard and it was all sold to weddings, parties and anything, right? So if we had a mate that had a wedding, we would, for $100 a keg of 20-litre corny kegs, would rock up and pour beer. But
a cricket club needed some beer.
Cricket club needed all that type of stuff, right? So we weren't selling it commercially. We were doing it under the radar, and it was quite scoundrels.
Yeah, and presumably Pirate Life was taken at that time.
Exactly. Yeah, you're exactly right.
Yeah.
And as it turns out, so was Scoundrel. So after all,
So this is where the legal comes into the podcast.
Well, probably leads into the next question, I suppose.
Oh, is that why we're called Scoundrel Brew?
No, why we're called Bonehead.
Yeah.
So we
Why we're not called Scoundrel.
So basically, when we decided to do Bonehead Brewing, we decided to divide and conquer. I still had my day job, and Anth was finishing up what he did to start working at Bonehead. So it made sense. Anthony had to then become the brewer, and from the background, I'll take care of sales and marketing. And that was kind of what I'd always done. Anth was, at that point, I got off and done other hobbies. Anthony continued brewing. He got off and done some extra study for brewing, so that just made perfect sense. I then did the IP search for Scoundrel Brewing, not realizing that if I did it,
That's legal advice, didn't we?
yeah. Well, no, at that point we didn't. I just went and did it and thought, right, it's available. Let's go ourselves Scoundrel Brewing, which is, I'm sure if I had have done an IP search for fish and chips, I probably would have tried to register fish and chips, right? So lesson learned, bit of a bonehead move. And then for a little while later, for a long time later, I then tried to sell Anthony on the name Bonehead because it was very much what we were about. So,
And you prevailed.
and we prevailed.
And what was the turning factor, Ant?
Turning factor. Misty-eyed on this,
May as well. You may as well.
The deciding factor was so my mother's got severe dementia these days, and one of her last lucid conversations with me was, "Do you trust Travis?" I'm like, "Yeah." So then, do you trust that he's going to make the right decision? I'm like, yeah, of course I do. So just go with it, because I was resisting the name.
I've never actually said this, but are you sure that was your last lucid conversation, or was she wrong? Like, she was wrong.
She still had her wits about her at that stage to a point, and then didn't for much longer after that.
So how did you get out of the Scoundrel situation, or do you prefer?
Wasn't much of a situation to do, really. We asked FM. So, long story short, there's a winery in South Australia who we won't mention, but they have trademarked the name Scoundrel for one of their wines, and we asked if we could coexist.
Yep.
And over the phone, it was like, "Yep, I'm sure we can come to some agreement." And then a few days later, got a cease and desist.
And then we picked up the phone again and thought, "Could have sworn I was talking to you about this."
Yeah.
We had this conversation. To which it was replied, "Dad's a lawyer, and why would we let go of it?" So it's okay. No, that makes perfect sense. So
Ticking all of the boxes in Raf's head for his IP trademarks practice.
Yeah, look, I mean, it is what it is. And when we were first starting out, there was no way that we were going to try and fight anything. You know, as you know, when you're starting a business, you put all your money into the business and trying to get as much stainless as you can to make as much liquid as you can. Not hire people to fight things that are probably a losing battle. So,
And in a way, lucky, I guess, that you found out at that stage before you're too far along and you could actually rebrand and
absolutely
do something different.
And we could bounce off it. You know?
Yeah, absolutely.
You know, by calling the business Bonehead Brewing, which this probably does lead into the next conversation, by calling the business Bonehead Brewing, it did one of a few things. A, it allowed us to continue that narrative and that story. So therefore, why you no longer called Scoundrel. So the 15 people that knew who we were kind of got some continuity to it.
So you were saying before, you know, nobody starts a business to pay lawyers. You start the business so that you can buy as much stainless steel as you can. But Anthony, why don't you tell us a little bit about the process of making a brew? How hard is it to run a commercial brewery in Melbourne?
A little bit harder than I first envisaged. So
Do something else if you're listening at home.
yeah, unless you got loads of money.
These guys, they don't want the competition.
No, it's got nothing to do with that, please.
That is also true.
I believe a rising tide lifts all boats.
Yeah, a little bit harder than I first thought. So we had some serious low budget original plans that we were going to do it, even starting off in my backyard with a small 300 litre brew house, and then it got scaled up, and I did some more research, and the more I read up, I'm like, nah, we'll be broke in the first 5 months if we do it this way. We've got to go large or go home. And when I say go large, we're still tiny compared to most, but it's as large as we could afford. I'd had no personal experience in a commercial brewery before, short of being in a few, but never really worked in one or knew the goings on of one. I started to meet a few people in the industry and obviously got a bit of advice, and luckily my neighbor, by coincidence, was opening up a brewery at the exact same time in Argentina. He was from Argentina. He was moving back to Argentina to open up a brewery pretty much the same size and getting equipment, ironically, from the same place we were looking at and everything like that. So long story short, he was an engineer and had a larger background on how to actually assemble the stuff and know what the right course was. So I bounced off him quite a bit. We ended up buying the equipment together, almost not a 2-for-1, but we packaged our purchasing together, and we actually went to China together to go inspect it and make sure everything was to our specifications. And when we got it back here, we assembled a fair bit of it ourselves, and they brought a technician over from their factory to help us assemble it all up. And I mean, there was a few learning curves on there. Like we had no idea how a steam boiler actually functioned. We just thought, you buy a boiler and plug it in. Well, it's a lot more complicated and expensive for that. And
because we just took a look before we started recording downstairs, and all the big all the equipment there. It has to be expensive, doesn't it?
It is. I mean, there's a
Big
lot.
investment.
On our scale, it is definitely. Yeah. I mean, we've got complete skin in this game. Our mortgages are basically paying for everything you see next door. Well, the initial startup anyway on that, and so we did everything we could within our budget. I mean, there's other breweries that are a lot more flash and have a lot better equipment than us. But
I think. To jump in there really quickly, I think we're as a business and as a team, we kind of pride ourselves on punching above our weight, if that makes any sense, right? So, for a long time we were running around saying, well, we were telling everyone that will come in, basically we're Melbourne's cheapest built brewery, right? In terms of how we've put it together.
I think the catch line there was, who the hell are these guys?
Yeah.
Well, it was a very impressive set of vats over on the other side. Can you guys tell us a little bit more about what goes into the vats and the range that you guys make?
Yeah. Do you want me to tackle this?
Go for it.
So I think for us, we've really looked at, I suppose, diversifying our portfolio or getting a range hierarchy, I think is important. And from my time as sales and marketing, I think that it's important that people understand a brand. You've kind of got to be comfortable with what they're putting out. So we do a lot of different tiers. And we've got that hierarchy to it. So we've got some entry level sort of stuff that we do as white paper around the world. So you might go into a pub and see such and such pale ale, well, it's just Bonehead Pale, or such and such Mexican Cerveza, it's our Cerveza. We've kind of got 2 or 3 of those lines. And then we've got a whole bunch of classic boneheads who are beers that are a little bit less mainstream than you'll think nowadays. So we don't have a standard IPA in that range. We don't really have a standard pale ale in that range. They're the dark lagers that we do. So Sleep Pea, our dark lager, Phase, our New England IPA is probably the most mainstream that we do nowadays. We've got a beautiful American red ale. We've got a Czech style Pilsner. These are the beers we launched the brewery with. And we have people coming in going, you've not got an IPA, you've not got a pale ale. What are you doing? It's like there's plenty of good IPAs and pales out there. Go and drink those, right? We're doing stuff that's a little bit different.
Not anymore. Drink house.
Yeah,
Fine. I was actually struck by by the range. There's quite when we went to the bar there.
there's quite a few.
There's quite a few there.
Well,
So that must make it more complicated.
Makes my job tricky.
it does, yeah. I mean, and not as hard now as it was when we first started. When we first started, we only had 4 little 10 hec uni tanks. So 10 hec fermenters, so 1,000 litres a piece. And we had no canning line. So we had a contract canner. We had a guy that would turn up in a van, and this is something you can still get done, unpack all his canning equipment and then set up downstairs in the bar and pack. The economy of scale says you need to pack all 4 tanks at once to make it worthwhile. So we had to Anthony had to line up the production schedule from the end. So what date is everything going to be finished? Let's work back from there. That's when the can is coming in. And we've got a Brooker's beer. Doesn't all take the same amount of time to ferment or to get ready. So you had to kind of line it all up from the back. It was a nightmare. Nowadays, we've got a lot more space and a lot more tanks. But we have these classic Bonehead, which are our core range. And then we're putting out a new beer or a limited release beer once every 2 weeks. So the market at the moment, and the market for the last few years, has definitely been one of, sometimes it's, I'll only drink a beer once. So you get people, it's kind of like Pokemon or Gran Turismo, if you're into that type of thing, where you've got to collect everything, you know. So you get people walking to a bottle shop. Yeah, you got to collect all the cars in Gran Turismo. Well, I did. So it's like you got to walk in, and you walk into a bottle shop, and you buy a mixed 6-pack.
So you're talking about the canned beers.
Canned
Only for a couple of weeks, you might have a.
Yeah,
Wow.
absolutely. Yeah, we'll put a.
I guess you've got the flexibility, don't you, to do that?
And that's the idea. We've got so many tanks in there now that we can just have new beers all of it.
But do you have to do it like a new label for each one?
Unfortunately, so yes.
Yeah.
Wow.
So a new label, new tap decal. And we try to do a lot more in keg than we do in can. But yeah, essentially we've got a new beer every 2 weeks, mainly under either the Bonehead series, which is just our serious release, funny enough, or we do another release called Smells Like Pop Culture. And the dry hopper that you've got there is part of that. It's actually a dry hopper, Die Harder reference. It's our Christmas beer.
Cool. That's great.
Where can you buy them?
So where can you find them around town? We're in most craft beer outlets, so small local bottle stores, independent local bottle stores. We're in a couple of vintage cellars and First Choice Liquors and Liquorlands. And we are, before Christmas, we should be in about 4 or 5 Dan Murphy's in Melbourne. But we are available nationally. So we've got distributors taking care of the other states. We just focus on direct sales here in Melbourne. We've got a website, boneheadbrewing.com.au. So we've got an online store there. And we've got the tap room here at 86 Parsons Street in Kensington. But yeah, get into, if you're listening at home, get into your local bottle-o and ask them for Bonehead Brewing.
We're going to wrap up this sort of section of the podcast with, it can't escape COVID. During those dark days, our Premier told us not to get on the beers during lockdowns, but everyone did, obviously. How did COVID affect your business? Did it grow? I know there was growth in the consumption of it. Did you guys sell more beer over COVID?
It completely changed the way we did things. I mean, pre-COVID, wholesale sales were a very small portion of this business. We relied a lot on the bar and people coming in over the weekend and drinking at the bar. And I think I would say maybe 20% of it was wholesale, 25% was wholesale. And that completely flipped on its head. Like, I worked the very last shift as the Premier was announcing everything's shutting down tomorrow. And from there, we're like, okay, luckily we had just purchased that canning machine about a month or 2 earlier. And we're able to say, okay, everything that's about to go in kegs, change course, we're going to put it all in can. And we were able to, at first, set up a really quick website, which still serves us well today. Sold a fair portion of beer online because there was a lot of people that just still wanted to support us, which was great. And then eventually Travis and the sales guys really pushed hard on the wholesale, and it changed our business significantly. I would say now to a 20% of the bar and the rest is wholesale.
Yeah, thereabouts.
So it's flipped on its head.
It's flipped on its head.
We were able to keep operating during that time. Like,
it was difficult,
and
it was difficult. And I mean, I don't want to get too far into it, but the whole JobKeeper thing, the way that it was structured didn't really favour us. We had just purchased a couple of extra tanks and a canning line, which means we were actually producing a whole lot more liquid than we were the previous year. And they only took one metric into account, how much you're actually physically selling or how much you're actually spending. And we only qualified for the first 3 months of JobKeeper, I think it was. And then after that, we were cut adrift, and it made things pretty tough, but we kept full staff on through COVID. To our own detriment probably, and we sacrificed quite a bit, both of us personally, to make sure everyone still had a job and we could still function as a business.
I mean, as a business, look, there were some really good things. We'll talk about those in a moment, but to get it out of the way, it nearly took us to the wall a couple of times, and we're still recovering from that hangover. We've got a big COVID hangover. The market really has only just come back to where it was pre-COVID. And, honestly, I'm rolling into New Year's. Last New Year's, basically, everybody went to a super spreader event. We all got COVID. And then whilst it wasn't a lockdown, everyone...
it might as well have been.
Yeah, everyone just went home. So the first 6 months of this year was the hardest retail landscape I've ever seen. And so that was quite difficult. During it, look, for rightly managed or not, if it wasn't for JobKeeper, we wouldn't be here. If it wasn't for our own, coffers, be that mortgage or whatever it might have been, we wouldn't be here. But we made a decision, as Anne said, to keep everybody employed, and we did everything we could to make sure that happened. From a brand perspective, so there's all the negatives and the hardships. From a positive perspective, everyone said that the beer consumption did this. That was great, and that was, if you think about the people that report, the companies that report on those metrics, they're not your local craft bottle shops, right? They're your Coles and your Woolworths. They're the guys that have the GfK data. They're the guys that have the point of sale systems that record that and report on that. And that's not our end of town when it comes to beer. But what it did well for us was we were a new business, and if you think about the path of purchase to buying something, and I said a moment ago, a lot of people don't drink the same beer twice, right? Some, not all, some. So what was happening is we had people going into craft bottle shops, and they're making that decision whilst they're making their 6-pack of beer in the fridge. Okay, I'm going to have an IPA. Okay, I'm going to have a pale ale. All right, I'm going to have a Bonehead. So you've got one marketing connection point there, deciding to buy Bonehead. They're making their mix pack. They're taking it home. They're putting it in their fridge, and then they're doing the exact same thing again. Okay, what am I going to drink today? Oh, today I'm going to have Bonehead. So it was almost like for every one interaction, we were having that double up, if that makes any sense. So our brand awareness went through the roof, which was fantastic. And I think if it wasn't for COVID, we wouldn't have seen such a sharp rise in brand awareness, which was good. At the same time, we did get a canning line, and we did get a lot more tanks. So not only, we had to pay for those, but it meant that we could diversify what we were doing. And that's really where this new beer, we've scaled back to a new beer every 2 weeks. We put out 46 new limited release beers in 2020. 52 weeks of the year, 46 beers. So just because the only way you could do it was to keep fresh. And for us, it worked really well because it meant that people wanted to go back to their local bottle shop. There was so much newness, so much innovation coming into the market that for the people that were only drinking beer once, they could go in there every week and find a new Bonehead bottle. And that worked for us.
I guess people who become familiar with the brand as well were kind of like, okay, what's coming next week? I'm going to try that one.
And the landscape's slowly changing back to a bit of a normality. Our core range in this current year, in 2022, has actually really thrived because people have gone back to drinking at the pub and just drinking a core range beer.
Absolutely.
So which takes a little bit of pressure off us as far as needing to reinvent the wheel every week, especially me.
And we do things quite planned. So this is the lovely balance, I guess, of both of our worlds. Ant's at an operational level, on the ground, keeping what's going on today. I'm trying to think about what we're doing next. So we sit down once every 6 months and plan out what we're doing for 6 months. So all our limited releases, we know what we're doing now in July, because we've sat there and planned those out. We know what those limited releases are. We couldn't do that if we were doing one a week. We would have to do it more, but you just couldn't do it. It'd be mental.
Bit of throwing spaghetti up against the wall.
Yeah. So yeah, and it's good. I mean, we build our range to kind of say, there's a lot of people that don't just drink one beer once, so they want to keep coming back to Mums or Phase or Junior or Sweet Pea or Revered or whatever the core range is. Whereas there's a lot of people that are just shopping newness and innovation, as it is in any consumer good. You've got to have a balance of both, for sure.
So now that you're sort of through that, I think the sort of that setup establishment phase, and you've got some brand awareness, it seems like when you go into a craft bottle shop, there's just a million different beers, and a million different beers from Melbourne. So how do you kind of stand out? How do you compete? What's the special thing that you do?
I think a lot of it. I mean, I know myself when I go into a craft bottle shop, visually I shop visually first. If there's really cool artwork on there, it's going to attract me to it. Then I'll look at the style of beer that it is. Then I'll look at the brewery.
Totally. I'm going to jump in there. I'm a sucker for a good label. I totally agree. I shop exactly the same way. Yeah.
And it's unfortunate in some circumstances because you could make an amazing beer but have a really crappy label and it might not try it. Yeah, but we have seen, and I'm not going to name names, but there are beers out there with amazing labels. The liquid inside really doesn't hold up.
Yeah, it's a balance. I think so. That's part of it, but it's that whole path to purchase. So I think when people think about how they're shopping, and if you're talking about consumer goods, a lot of the marketing's got to come down to what that path to purchase is. So, I mean, a person wakes up and I'm going to buy a beer. They know where they're shopping. So getting them to the store is not the problem. You're right. Once you're in store, what are we picking up? And I think it's got to come down to, for us, there's nothing going into store. They're not taking a catalogue into their local bottle shop going, I'm buying on special. So they're not buying on price point. They're buying on, brand loyalty. Have I had enough of this brand to trust what I'm buying? And therefore, can I try something different and feel like it's okay, right? So for us, liquid is number one, all right? So the quality that we put into it is number one. And we always strive to make sure that our beers are three things. And they sound a little bit silly if you're not into beer or beverage, but balanced. So that's not one-dimensional, right? You can't just be very hoppy without having a bit of sweetness to cover that, or very bitter without having a bit of sweetness to cover that off. Two is approachable. So you've got to make sure that, it's not, you're like, oh my God, I'm chewing through this. I don't need to not, just those kind of comments, we need to steer away from those. And then third is sessionable. And I don't mean light in ABV, I mean moreish. Like, oh, can I have this? And if we focus on making sure, and we were pretty staunch on this early on.
I think we're judging by the look around the table here. All the glasses seem pretty empty.
Yeah. So they're definitely sessionable, right? So we, early on, we started focusing on this, and we were very, very strict and fierce on it. You put on a suit from a certain tailor that fits in a certain way. Right?
Yeah.
That's how it should be. So we try to build on trust in that brand awareness, and then packaging is what helps it come off the shelf. It's what draws the eye.
Sort of turning direction a little bit into the legal space and the regulatory space. Like, obviously the sale and the advertising of alcohol is highly regulated. How have you managed your way through that? I mean, I know, Travis, you talked about, you worked at Foster's before, you got some familiarity with it, but just seems like there's so many, every state and territory's got their own liquor licensing regime. There's a million different requirements. How do you keep up with it, and how have you managed it?
Yeah, the local authorities here, the VCGLR or whatever they're called now, and BCCC, I think they are now. They were quite good to deal with, to be quite honest. Out of all the bodies we had to deal with over setting up this brewery, they were actually really good there. I think because they're only a small team out in Richmond, I think everybody has each other's back and knows what everyone's role is. So you're not picking up the phone and like, nah, that's not my job. You got to call back, and everyone knows what they're doing. And they were extremely helpful with information and really helped us through the process.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And there's not a million changes in the 5 years we've been open that really affect us, because we've got a producer's license, which means we can produce and we can sell wholesale, but we can also sell retail on our own premise.
And all alcohol. So yeah, we can sell a bottle of gin and use it like a bottle shop.
Not as a takeaway, no, we can't. Unless it's produced here, we can.
Over the bar.
Yeah, we can sell it. Someone wants a mixed drink, definitely, but we can't sell a takeaway bottle that isn't made on this premise.
Well, the only exception to that was the gin that we made.
Yeah, exactly, because it was made here.
But yeah, and I'll probably say the same thing about the ATO, to be really honest. I think they're, from an excise point of view, I think they've been quite good as well. I mean, you set up, you don't know the ins and outs of everything, and there's no government department will be like, oh, here's the plan on what you do if you want to open a brewery. So just asking the question has been really good. Not often have we been met with, what do you mean? You don't know? Which has been really, really good.
The only thing I'll say on that is on a federal level, the government departments all think you run like CUB.
Yeah.
They don't have an idea that we're a tiny little one factory brewery where, everybody's a massive multinational corporation according to it. And we're all treated as such.
And I think in terms of legalities, in terms of packaging requirements and what you need on tins and cans, the Independent Brewers Association has been a really good resource for that. They keep us abreast of any changes. Just they want to make sure that everyone's doing the right thing. Falls back on their members, so they've been a great help. And in terms of so flying too close to the sun. In certain things, like the beer you're drinking at the moment is obviously, it's obviously to me a Die Hard 2 reference, right? We've got a caricature of Bruce Willis exploding out of an arrow. We try not to fly too close to the sun. We haven't called it Bruce Willis's IPA.
Right. Be the next Kanye's Burgers.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Although we did, as soon as I read that, my initial reaction was, let's do a collab with these guys.
I think we steer clear of Kanye for the minute.
But yeah, so we've done a few where we have come very, very close, I think, flying too close to the sun. And, we're in independent craft liquor stores. No one from Marble Entertainment is going to see that can of Hulk Smash.
So a little bit more licensed just
to be a little bit.
Yeah, and also they're here today, gone tomorrow. These beers, we make one batch at a very small quantity.
The other thing is,
yeah, that's true. So you can sort of
cease and desist. Well, we already have.
Yeah.
The other thing is, if it doesn't smell right, then you don't do it. Really. We've had a look at with our Smells Like Pop Culture release, what type of things should we do or could we do? Let's do a Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtle beer. Well, okay, if we're going to do that, it's really got to be focused on how our consumer, an adult, remembers Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtle. It can't be Michael Bay. It's got to be a cartoon from the 90s. We want to do a whatever beer. Well, does that play a little bit too young? We can't go anywhere near that.
That's the biggest problem in packaging, especially in the beer industry. You can't be seen to play into a young audience. No. There was a couple of breweries that got tripped up on that because they had, whether it be Star Wars references or something that looked similar to SpongeBob SquarePants or something like that, and they were seen to be playing to a children's market, and they were made to change.
And I feel for that, especially the Star Wars reference, like the beer. We don't need to know names. It's widely publicized. That beer started as a limited release beer. We could quite easily have fallen into that world. Had it have been here, we would have made the exact same beer. We just would have called it something else immediately. So we've had Smells Like Pop Culture releases that we can't do again that have come back as bona fide releases, and well, rather than calling it sabotage and it being a Beastie Boys reference, we call it Mirage because it's a lot. You know what I mean? Like a lot. So yeah,
it's a tough line because everything appeals to kids in some way or another. Yeah. So that whole, is it targeted at kids versus is it just something that might appeal to kids?
Yeah.
If you could put it, I don't know, anything in there, and you might run into an issue because a kid might be interested in it. Well, I think that's been fascinating. We always like to ask one last question, and and I might ask you, Anthony, if you were the Prime Minister of Australia or the Premier of Victoria, be closer to home, and you could change one law.
Would it be the law that gives all the money?
Lots of money.
Lots of money. Just to us, nobody else.
But gimme.
If on a federal level, going back to probably excise, I would say we should probably look at the American model, which really encourages growth of smaller breweries. In America, every town has their own brewery, and people really get behind their local brewery. And I think there's some states that you can't export to other states, even because you have to keep it local, and they're taxed accordingly. So Budweiser would be at the very high end of the scale of tax, and the local microbrewery or brew pub would be barely paying any tax whatsoever as far as on excise tax we're talking here. Whereas in Australia, we are all loaded into one little bucket, and we're on the same level playing field as CUB. They have made some changes to it in the last 18 months, which definitely are better, but it certainly doesn't go where it needs to go. What about you, Travis?
I don't know.
They give Bonehead more money tax.
I don't know. I think I don't know. Probably steering away from breweries. I don't know. There's lots of rules that I don't quite understand. I don't know why I'm doing 80 kilometers an hour on a 5-lane highway. So I'll pass.
Where do you start?
Yeah, where do you start?
Get rid of speed cameras, you say?
No. Look, I tend to agree. I think if you look at the model of wet tax for wine versus excise for alcohol or for beer, it doesn't make a lot of sense as to why some things are quite light and are governed based on the wholesale.
Prime producers, are they not?
Yeah.
So for the uneducated like me on this topic, so how's wine treated differently?
So when? Sorry to cut off the end of that question, but so wine equalisation tax was introduced as a way to, I suppose, offset the difference between imported product and the national product, because wineries are seen as primary producers essentially, whereas we are seen as manufacturers of alcohol. So that could be
Don't get drunk on wine.
No. So yeah, it's we're seen as manufacturers of alcohol. It could be high alcohol RTDs. We're taxed the same way they are, versus wine, which is 15% liquid in a bottle versus 5% liquid in a can. I don't really get the difference. The main difference is, for us, it's based on the alcohol content of the vessel that has been sold to the public. Therefore, kegs are taxed at a different rate to packaged goods. And the packaged goods. So for every time we sell a case of beer, to put it in perspective, so a case of beer is $50 for a $50 wholesale ish on a 16 pack of beer. How much of that goes to the government? $14.
Yeah, about that. Last
14.
Not including GST.
Not including GST. Then so there's GST on, so there's tax on the tax. Then, well, it's not tax, it's excise. So it's not tax on the tax. You can't tax. So it's tax on the excise. So we've got $14 goes there. You've then got to think that, so it's only $50 wholesale. You've got the can, you've got making the liquid, et cetera, et cetera. So there's not a lot of money in those. So especially over COVID, when that was all we could sell, you can kind of then start to imagine why things got a bit tight for a lot of breweries. Their least profitable wine is all they had left.
Which kind of goes back to my point. It's just such a confusing system, and they've tried to simplify it a little bit in the last 18 months, but it's so confusing. You've got different rates for different size packaging. It just makes no sense.
Yeah.
Whereas wet literally is just a percentage of the wholesale product. Yeah, right. So you can drop your wholesale and pay less tax.
Well, on that very sobering note, I like that. Thank you very much. That was excellent. And thank you for the beer, and thank you for having us.
And if people have been listening at home and they want to find out more about Bonehead, where can they go?
So you got boneheadbrewing.com.au or Bonehead Brewing AU or Bonehead AU? Bonehead Brewing AU on your social platforms. Yeah. So thanks so much for coming in.
Thank you.
A really good chat.
Thank you. It's awesome. Cheers.
We do a lot of these from a beer world perspective, from a craft beer perspective, and it's nice to do one that isn't just focused on I don't know, mayhem and mayhem and flavors.
It's good to do one of these sober as well. It's my match, bro.
Yeah, well, yeah. I wouldn't know where those questions to ask, to be honest with you. So it's great. Thank you.
Thanks so much.
Thank you for tuning in to Legally Consumed, a consumer products podcast by the Consumer Products Law Firm. This was presented by Raf Goldenberg, Kay Ho, and Will McMinn from CIE Legal. Our theme song is by our very own CIE Legal house band, which is comprised of Will McMinn, Andrew Marr, and Andrew Thompson.
This podcast production is in partnership with Social Star.
If you've enjoyed this episode, please make sure you follow us on Apple Podcasts, Google Play, or Spotify, or wherever else you get your podcasts from. For more updates and behind-the-scenes footage, head to our Instagram at CIE Legal, all one word. You can also check out our website to listen to a range of episodes and find additional free information at www.cielegal.com.au. To get in contact with CIE Legal about consumer products legal services, reach out to us on info@cielegal.com.au. Thanks again for listening to Legally Consumed, and see you all in the next episode.